Hello everyone! Welcome back to Ghostlanding Gaming. I am so excited to have so much interest in Overwatch team comps. I have learned a lot over the last week or so as I've been researching more for this video to bring it to you. Now, first up, don't forget to subscribe so that you know when I drop the next set of helpful hints. Also, just to note that a lot of this team comp archetype categorization stuff is really nebulous and kind of subjective, so if I haven't put it in the place that you would, I'd love to hear about that and learn more from you. I did some research and I took my own opinion, and that's what I will present to you today. In my first Overwatch video, I talked a little bit about dive, poke, and brawl and what those things mean, but today we're going to go into it on a bit of a deeper level. Generally, these team compositions working in with like what heroes are in the meta at that current moment in the season are going to be what makes teams really successful. Do you need to know this to just play Overwatch and have a good time? Absolutely not. But a lot of highly ranked players use this as a cohesive team strategy to be able to get those wins. Now, it's going to be really helpful if you have a lot of heroes in the same team that kind of dabble in the same archetype, and that is how you're going to be able to all use that same strategy against the other team. So a dive composition is going to be all about getting in, doing damage, not dying, and getting back out. As I said before, you want to have a lot of mobility with your heroes in this. You also are going to be focusing on one target, so they're going to be doing less large around the area damage and a lot of diving in, getting on one target, doing a lot to them, and then getting out. Another thing that's characteristic of a dive composition is a really quick switch from passive to aggressive. So they can be hanging out on the back line, doing their own thing, and then they're going to be the ones who are deciding where the fight happens, when it happens, and who it happens to. This is also a way that they're going to punish bad positioning by the other team, so depending on certain maps, if the other team is in a place that they can easily be gotten, dive is gonna go get them. Poke is all about doing damage from afar. So they have three main goals. You want to weaken enemies before the big fight happens, you want to force them to make decisions, and you also want to waste their abilities. The effectiveness of these three goals are going to be maximized at choke points and on defense. So if you've got really long sight lines, that's great. If you have a high vantage point of the spawn and you're defending a payload or an objective point, that's also going to be great for poke. For brawl, you are going to be closing distance, but in a different way than dive is, because you're going to be getting in and then you're going to be staying in. So this really requires a lot of health and or shield, general sustainability. You want to be able to really hold up on your own and with support in a prolonged fight with the other team. You also are going to be overpowering them with high damage and sustain. So you have a lot of damage, you have a lot of tankiness. It's beefy. That's the best way to describe brawling. This is going to be most effective on maps with short sightlines and little verticality, because you don't have that much momentum or movement, and a lot of your abilities and weapons are going to be more melee, short range, high damage kind of thing, so it's to your advantage to be in a smaller enclosed space where you can really take control of that fight. Knowing that you only have 5 players on your team, how do you counter when somebody else has a cohesive strategy like this? I like to think of it like rock, paper, scissors. Each composition played well should be able to counter one of the others. You want your brawlers to have enough tankiness to outlive diving. You want your dive to have the mobility to avoid the long range, high damage poke shots. And you want your poke to have enough damage to be able to take on the brawl from the back line, be retreating, and still get them. Now, building a team is pretty complex because some heroes are going to require more or less from their teammates than others. For example, a tank with a thick shield is going to need a little bit less support than a tank that doesn't have a thick shield. a DPS or a support who's got a ton of really good mobility is probably going to need a little bit less help in a brawl from their tank when, they're kind of scattered on the outside, maybe not on the point, doing other things. It's important to remember that there's no wrong answer. This is kind of complicated strategically, and a lot of people don't play this way, so it's really okay to just pick a hero that you like and play them, but it is kind of fun to lock in with other people's abilities and be able to work together as a team. Each of the roles, tank, damage, and support, all have representatives from dive, poke, and brawl, and it's important to remember that it's really not set in stone, and that a lot of the heroes actually work in multiple composition types. This is a very disclaimer-heavy video. I'm mostly going to go over the textbook cases here, but I will also mention some of the ones that I think work particularly well in multiple compositions. This is the part you've all been waiting for. We'll talk about Brawl first. So for tanks, it's really obvious that Reinhardt is like the poster child for tank brawlers. He's got the shield, he's got the charge, he is really buff, and I mean that both in terms of his ability to take damage and also... Anyway, so he's definitely a really good brawler. He can take a lot, he can do a lot. Don't take that out of context. I also find Orisa to be a really good brawler. She is often able to get in there and stay in there. Some of her abilities will push people away, which gives her a little bit more time to reset and keep doing that damage. Maga was recently dropped, and he is so overpowered, and he's been nerfed at least once by this point, maybe more. Possibly rightfully so, because he was super OP when he first came out. But he, again, is a great brawler because of the massive amounts of damage that he's able to do in a close range, and he's able to stay alive through it. Junker Queen, I see brawling more than I see her doing anything else. Her shout also enables dives pretty well, so that can also be there, but that's more of what she supports and less of what she does herself. Zarya, in my research, I found that she can kind of do all three. This is kind of general, but when she's charged, that's obviously going to be when she is the most helpful. Ramatra, this one is a little controversial sometimes. I found people wanting him to be in Brawl. I've been seeing him played poke more because he's got a long range ability, and he's one of the few tanks who can do a lot of long range ability. But that's just my opinion. And then Roadhog. I think Roadhog is good for brawling. I think he's a lot better after the recent rework. He is able to stay alive more. That was kind of the problem, especially if the other team doesn't have an Ana. You're kind of able to do whatever you want as a Roadhog. But he's great because he can heal up, he can hook, he can do the trap. That is another good brawl ability, and his short range damage is really good. For DPS brawlers, I would say the two biggest ones, in my opinion, would be Mei and Torbjorn. Torbjorn's a real park and bark. He gets in there, and he doesn't really leave, especially when he's planting his turrets. Mei you're seeing a lot right now because of the wall. That is great for holding people off, and the freeze ability is great in brawls because it really weakens target members of the enemy team. Other great DPS for Brawl is going to be Symmetra and Bastion, and I would also throw Cassidy in there as well. He is pretty multi-talented, but he's good at sticking out in a fight close range. You've got some really classic Brawl supports, and the cornerstone of that is going to be Lucio and Baptiste. That is the biggest Brawl combo for support. Lucio himself works in a lot of compositions because of the speed boost, but a Brawl composition will work best with Lucio, for sure. Baptiste is valuable in there because he's got an AoE heal that, if you're all in a little close range clump fighting, is going to be really helpful to your whole team. I would also consider Moira a Brawl support. I play Moira, and I would say you get in there and you kind of stay, and then you use your mobility to get out. She's able to do a lot of damage at the same time as healing, which is pretty important. Her abilities are kind of shorter range unless you're slinging the healing and damage balls out really far. So brawl it is, I would say, for Moira. For dive compositions, once again, the tanks are going to be pretty emblematic and easy to understand in explaining which heroes work where. So I would say that Winston and Doomfist are really great examples of dive heroes. They have abilities that let them jump in from a point that's kind of farther away, and they're usually able to get out. Diva and Wrecking Ball are also in there. Again, mobility. Wrecking Ball is one that is going to be a little different because he's got to like anchor himself and set up, and he just kind of functions a little bit differently from those other tanks. But Winston, Doomfist, those are the real big ones. Lots of damage in here, and the damage heroes are the ones that kind of get a little more shifty on which category they're in. They can kind of go more places, and the supports and the tanks are really going to be more characteristic of the team composition. But for diving, I think the ones that are really important for DPS, we've got Genji, Sombra, Tracer, and Reaper. So if you think about those are ones that have speed. They have like sudden damage. They are able to get in close and do things. Think about Sombra with her, invisibility, and then she's got her teleport. That is like perfect for a dive. She always like gets in behind one team member, targets them, and then leaves. And I think the targeting one team member is something that I learned about dive that is pretty important, and Sombra is a really great example of. Tracer also does this. She has really fast renewing ability that allows her to move around very quickly. Reaper, untargetable while he's like floating around in his little altered shape. That's great. Other DPS that I would put in this category: Echo, Pharah, Sojourn, and Soldier 76. Moving on to supports, the big one that I would put into dive is Kiriko. She has really good ability to get to her teammates with that teleport. Her abilities also kind of make things easier for everybody instead of just like healing them or shielding them, so I think she is great for that composition. In my research, I also found Mercy, Lifeweaver, and Brig to be in dive comps. I can see the point with Lifeweaver. He can pull out the teammates who are in a tough situation, so that's helpful in diving. Brig, she's not super divey herself, but she is able to help teammates who are diving, so that's also good. Moving on to poke, I think this is the easiest of the categories to conceptualize. For tanks, I think there's only one tank that I really feel like is just poke, and that is Sigma. Generally, he just kind of stays outside of things, and he's helpful. Like, a good Sigma is really great, but you don't see him in the middle of stuff a lot because he's going to stay behind that shield that goes pretty far out from him. Other tanks in poke, and this is more my opinion than anything else. I've seen Ramatra being played pokey a lot, and Roadhog. With the hook, especially on certain maps, like the one with the hole in the center, there's no better feeling than yoinking somebody right into the middle of the hole. That is long enough range to be sort of considered poke for a tank. I don't know if that would work in a poke composition really, but he does have some elements of that. For damage, these are really good. This is obvious. Widowmaker. Duh. I mean, she is a sniper. That is poke. I would also put Ashe in there. Not exactly sniper, but still scoped weapon. And she really picks out a single target and like is trying to do things to them. Hanzo. Again, I feel like these are pretty self-explanatory. He's got the bow. He's singling somebody out. He can attack from really far away. Yep. I also put Junkrat in here. Junkrat doesn't exactly have the range and the precision that the others do, but he is kind of mostly about being annoying. And if you think about the reason why you would be poking, again, it is to be force them to make decisions, waste their abilities, weaken them before a big fight. If you are getting thrown around and blown up by Junkrat bombs and grenades and things, that's not going to be good for you going into a fight. You're going to be half dead by the time you even get to the Reinhardt. So that's why I'm putting him into poke. For supports, Ana. She's got great long range, and she's a really good counter for Roadhog, like the counter at the moment. So keep that in mind when you are playing against Roadhog. Other supports that I would put in poke, I put Zenyatta in here. He can do many things, but he does have pretty good damage from his thing, you know, and he also has, you know, pretty good range with the orbs that he's throwing out. And then Illari, she is able to shoot from kind of far away. She's flying a little bit. She has the pylons. Okay, I know I said I wasn't going over all of them, and then I went over all of them, so you're welcome. One of the things that I found that was a pleasant surprise to me is that the team composition is based on the support. And if you think about it, this kind of makes sense, because your healers, your support is what's going to be reviving you, keeping you alive, whatever. So, you know, Lucio and Baptiste are a really great baseline for a Brawl composition. So they're what you're going to be going off of. I mean, that is the strongest way to support that. If you're picking Torbjorn, like, that's not an indicator that everybody else should be playing Brawl necessarily. I just found that really interesting because I feel like sometimes in some games the support is overlooked. I wouldn't necessarily say that about Overwatch, but it's just kind of a general thing. But I think it's cool that they are a lot of times the way that you anchor your team. I would also say this kind of applies to tanks, but go supports. I love playing support. Okay, things to remember. Summary. Recap. This is rock, paper, scissors. Every team composition should be able to do something that evades and hurts another team composition. Dive. You're focusing one target. You're getting in, you're getting out. Poke. You're weakening enemies before a fight. Brawl. You're closing distance, getting in there, staying in there until you die or until you win. Hopefully you win. Thank you so much for watching. I know you've all been waiting for this one, and I am excited to have learned a lot. I feel like this is the thing that I really learned the most about as I was making this video. Keep commenting. Thank you so much for all of the comments. I'm really appreciating the feedback. This video was directly inspired by people commenting saying, hey, I actually think that this one is in a different place, and maybe learn about that. So I'm always down to learn more things and then girlsplain them to you. Alright, I will see you next time on Girlsplaining Gaming. If you leave enough comments or likes or subscribes, I will drop the document. So just think about that.